What's up, everyone? It is Nico the Brain, one of the co-founders here at Boundless Media.
I'm the other co-founder. I'm Larissa Lemaster.
And we're super excited to bring you the foundations of marketing made accessible and really easy for businesses. Because here's the thing. One of the hardest things that we've noticed is that sometimes it's difficult to get started. We want to answer a couple of questions that will really help you go from 0 to 100 today. So, Larissa, let me ask you a question. Do you post daily on social media? And why? That's you don't. So why you lie?
I personally don't. Most of my focus professionally is on a lot of the operational side on a lot of things. So I help a lot of people post daily on social media, and I help answer a lot of questions for them. My personal content that I put out is not daily, but it will be.
I should have. So I'm gonna actually do a follow up. So I'll cut this. But Larissa, what stops most businesses from posting on social media or digital media every single day? What do you see in the marketplace? It's really hard for them to do that.
A lot of what small businesses really struggle with in posting often is really, number one, like they don't want to seem super spammy, which totally makes sense. You don't want to be putting out content that your audience isn't receptive to. That's just kind of a waste of everybody's time, and it dilutes your brand. And a lot of the other issues that small businesses run into, especially the clients that we work with, is they just don't really know their message, and they don't really know like how do I post about the same thing every single day? I don't have enough content around that. And that's something that they really struggle with. But honestly, a lot of it comes with time and being able to figure out, how do you create that content and how do you create it in ways that are really manageable. So like for us, a lot of things we do is, we source questions, we take a lot of the feedback we get from our clients and from people we work with, and we turn that into, we're like, oh, like if one person's asking it, a lot of other people probably want to know.
Absolutely. And just on that, should every business be on every single platform? Because we see that a lot too, with a customer coming to us and saying, hey, I want to be on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Quora. Should they be on every single site?
I mean, honestly, no, right? Like, let's say your ideal customer is like 20 years old. Where do you want to go to find them? You probably want to go to Instagram, Snapchat, maybe Twitter. Most of them aren't going to be on Facebook. Most of them, they might be on Pinterest, depending on kind of their interests, but you really want to see like, why waste time on putting effort into building social media that isn't giving you any return? If your audience isn't on a social media platform, like it's not worth your time.
No, definitely. And the one thing I will add to the whole social media game is your ideal customer might not necessarily be active on every single platform, right? So we all have mostly every single platform on our phones, but we have a default couple that we go to. So what you want to figure out is which ones do your customers and clients go to quite a bit, and how can you create content that makes sense for the platforms that they're on? Obviously, if you're on YouTube, you should probably not be thinking about long form, text posts, because that's not the point of that platform. Like when you go there, you want a show like this, you want something that's more engaging. So for Instagram, you probably don't want to write a whole novel in the captions, but you want to have something that's short, concise, and illustrates a certain point that goes with a specific image. So I think that's really beneficial to know. Is what are you seeing as, we're going to 2020, what are you seeing as the opportunities for small businesses, especially in marketing, but doesn't necessarily have to be?
I think the greatest opportunities for small businesses are definitely one, like create a message, make sure it is narrow, it speaks directly to your customer. And then after that, it's really like, how do you hyper focus on that niche and really become an active part of that community? I think that's where the most benefit comes for small businesses in particular, is how do they become a part of the community that their customer lives in? And that's where we find a lot of things like Facebook groups are super useful in those terms. If your customer is really active in Facebook groups, then that's something you want to explore. Or if your customer is really active on like Twitch, for example, you want to get on that platform and you want to be part of that community, somebody that they look to and trust, and that they really see you as like a valuable source of information.
I couldn't agree more. And the one thing I'll add to the whole community thing is make sure that it's not one-sided. This is the year where I think conversational marketing is definitely going to be one of the most powerful tools that you and I have. Because again, if you're in the community and you're just saying things all the time, and you're not listening to the feedback from your community, or you're not engaging with them in those community settings, then it doesn't really matter if you have 1 million followers if you say something and no one responds to it, because they know that, oh, Nico's posting, they're not gonna reply to me, or like it's gonna be very one-sided. So remember to take the offline, where if you go to a networking event and you're the only one talking, that person you're talking to is probably not gonna care that much or lose attention, because you're not making an active effort to get to know who they are. So
Yeah.
Awesome. The next question I have for you is, how can I get more clients using social media marketing?
Well, I love what you said earlier about conversational marketing. That's really going to be the biggest way that your social media actually converts into real dollar sales, which is why we market in the first place. You really want to make sure that you are, again, like being part of that community. And then once, let's say you sell clothes or something, and you are really a big part of the community of your audience. And then you kind of say like, hey, just so you guys know, like I am a part of this, like I know you, you trust me, I'm selling these clothes, and I think you'll really like them too. That's a much easier sell than, you see an ad on whatever platform and then you scroll past like, yep, stock images, yep. And that's something you really want to avoid. You want to make sure all your content is genuine, and that's the best way you can really convert clients into being actual dollars in your pocket.
And they stay around for longer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're much more loyal.
The one thing I will say is, and this is something I've seen a lot of businesses struggle with, is remember what you're selling, not necessarily the product or service, but the why you're selling it, right? So really know that if I'm a gym owner, I'm trying to get more people into my gym, that I'm selling the outcome that my gym is going to provide them. It's not necessarily the fancy shoes that we give everyone for cycling or the fancy equipment that we have. It's about the outcome that we're having. So make sure that in your marketing that you're focusing on, why should anyone care, and what's the outcome and benefit for them?
Yeah, I love that gym example. Like if you are running a gym, you're not selling like, oh, I have treadmills, I have weights, I have all these. You're not selling that. You're selling like the promise of self-confidence, or the promise to be able to build yourself into something that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. So Larissa, people always ask us what our FDE method is, and I think it's something I talk about quite a bit. So I'm gonna have you share that with the audience.
The FDE method is, it's honestly like the best way to approach your marketing. It's like when you're building a house, right? You don't build a house without focusing on your foundations first. So we focus on the foundations. We want to make sure that the base of your brand is really good. You understand who you are, who you're talking to. We really dial down that message. And then we move on to the D, which is design. So that's when you actually take those foundations and you kind of say, okay, now what are my goals? How do I apply those foundations to my long-term goals? And how do I make that actually work? How do I make sure what I think my customers feel? How do I make sure the content I'm producing creates that feeling? And then we go into execution, which is really, your day-to-day. It's really, you're down in the weeds, you're, making sure you're posting, putting out content. And we have services around that as well, where we will help create, like a marketing machine that makes sure your content, reaches all the platforms you need it to reach and all the formats you need it to reach. So whether you need video, text, images, whatever else, and we have, a system for that to really cut down your time.
Absolutely. The one thing I'll add to the execution is make sure that when you're in the weeds, that you're actually paying attention to what's working, what's not. One of the biggest opportunities here for 2020 is the fact that there is this amazing feedback loop in social media marketing. Whereas before the internet, mass media, you had to kind of play it safe with the ads that you put out, the content that you release, because you're trying to appeal to the most wide audience. And it was very, very expensive, both in money and time and energy and resources, to put out something and just hope it works. Here, the cost of entry is really, really nothing. So if you put out a video and you think it's going to hit and it doesn't work, that's okay. Make a note of that and move on and keep going until you find something. When you find something, put more energy, resources, and time into that. And again, that's the opportunity for 2020. Cost is so low. So whether you use our machine, whether you do it for your own company, make sure that you prioritize just a feedback loop. So keep experimenting, see what works, cut what doesn't, and just iterate on top of that.
Yeah.
So the next question I have is, influencers are starting to get quite important, not just in traditional business. They used to be called thought leaders and experts, but today they're becoming a lot more important. So what do you see as influencers in 2020? What's the opportunity there?
Well, I mean, I think to really understand the big picture of that, we need to look at it from a really holistic view. People see influencers as like, when I want to go look at somebody who, let's say like in the fitness space, like I know exactly who I go to. I know exactly like, I'm like, oh, like I have questions. Like I want to go look at their YouTube or their Instagram and see like if maybe they've addressed this in some form. And I want to see like kind of how they did it. It's really like influencers help other people model their own lives after the life of the influencer. That's kind of the whole goal, right? Even if it's maybe not reality, they sell it as reality. So if you're a beauty blogger, you have that influence in the makeup space. Like you say like, oh, I love this shadow. I love this pigment. You know, this lip liner is really great. Like, look how good this is. But you don't go to that beauty influencer for tech advice. You don't go there to be like, hey, what's the best phone to get? You know, it just doesn't make any sense. So it's really, you know, specialized sources of information. You know, you can think of it as like really, really specialized, like journalism in a way almost. You know, they report on what they do, what they found, like what products they like, what products they don't. And then in addition to that, you know, I guess looking at it from the journalism lens, a lot of times they really say they're like, oh, I hate this. That's influence still. Like a lot fewer people are going to buy that product. If the influencer that people kind of see as the thought leader in that space, if they hate your product, then why would your consumers think that they like it?
As you can tell, I definitely use the influencers for the for pigments information. As you can tell, I'm looking great today. And the one thing I'll add to the conversation is you are a influencer yourself too. If you are if you've been in business for more than 2 years, you're kind of an expert at that. So my one piece of advice moving forward in 2020 is make sure that if you want to build influence, you have to follow the 3E method, which is you have to entertain, you have to educate, and then you have to engage with your audience. So for instance, if you are, pick whatever your business is, pick something that's entertaining about that, because if you're not entertaining in 2020, especially here in social media, then you don't stand a chance to get the right person's attention. And it doesn't mean that you have to have all these crazy graphics or whatever. Just figure out, how do you bring out the personality of your brand? How do you make it fun and real, right? That's 2020 is all about authenticity, right? So bring that to get attention. And tell them about what you do, your industry, what's happening, what are the trends, what's the resources, what not to do when you're in the industry. Educate them, because that's how you build trust. And eventually you get to the third E, which is engage. Again, the best part about the internet and social media is that you get to reach anyone you want, but you have to make it contextually relevant to them. Because if someone reaches out to me and says, hey, do you want to buy an RV? Listen, love RVs, don't want one, not my need. If you engage with me, I'm not going to go do it, right? But if your business and company does something that I need, I'm much more likely to actually have a real conversation.
If you sell business books, Nico's your person.
Listen, I am the biggest advocate of business education, right? So if you have a book you like, well, link it down because I want to read it. So. Next question I have for you is, should you be the face of your organization's business accounts?
I mean, that's much more subjective. That's something where it really depends on who you are, what your business is. Like if we go back to the beauty example, you need a face. Mm-hmm. Like you need somebody that people trust. And it really is also like, if you're an accounting firm though, honestly, do people care what you look like? Does it matter? Like, do they care if it's you or if it's just quality? You know, like I think that's a good distinction to make. Do they care about pure quality, or do they care about more personal endorsement, which I think is what you get when you make like an individual the face of a company. You really get that personal endorsement. So it's really, I think, understanding like, do your customers care about that? Do they want that?
Listen, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, because there's no right or wrong answer. There's just right or wrong answers for your business, right? Because there are superhero movies where there's one superhero and that's the face of the whole franchise. But there are movies and franchises built around a team of characters there's no necessarily one main character, but it makes sense. So for your business, if you're especially small, potentially you might have to be the face of the business, but don't limit yourself, because here's the thing. There's a reason that TV shows like Friends have been around for so long, because there's characteristics in people, right? Even you smile because you know, right? Like it's so true. There's someone like, I identify with Chandler in this sense, but with Monica here, right? You add a little bit more diversity and you're much more likely to strike a chord with someone who might not necessarily identify with Chandler all the time. He's more of a Monica type of person, you know what I'm saying?
I'm a Rachel person.
Oh, I mean, hey, listen, Phoebe, don't sleep on Phoebe.
I love Phoebe. Phoebe's my favorite, but I think I understand. I'm like, I have too much respect for her. I'm not Phoebe.
I get it. What is the biggest challenge that we're looking at for 2020 social media marketing?
I think the biggest challenge is really making sure you're reaching your audience, because I think the most recent statistic is people see something like 5,000 ads a day. That might be kind of high.
Like 4,000.
I don't know.
It's 4,000 a week, but
But we see an insane amount of advertisements every day, and you got to see like, how are you pushing through all of that to make something that resonates? Like, can you think of a single billboard that you've seen in the last week that you remember? I can't.
What's a billboard?
Yeah, I don't even focus on them, but people pay a ridiculous amount to. I know that there's a lot of like auto accident
Insurance.
lawyer ones.
Yeah.
I know that like that's a typical genre, but honestly, like if you want to reach me, don't put your stuff on a billboard. Like I won't see it. I won't pay any attention to it. Like it might be in my face, but none of it will resonate with me and none of it will stick with me. And that's something I think a lot of people forget too. Is like a lot of people can see your stuff. Views does not translate to sales. Mm-hmm. And that's something too. Like you want to make sure your data, you're not being like, oh, but we had so much reach. And like, that's great. But did your sales increase? Did that reach correlate to really, really strong actual like money, or a really strong, like what's your engagement? Do you have actual engagement? Is it just like,
or just like metrics like that don't really turn into results, right?
Yeah. And that's something a lot of people will try to sell you. They'll be like, we can get you twice the views. It's like they can buy you twice the views, but that doesn't mean like
super cheap to buy views, right?
Yeah, it's not hard.
Is it twice the sales though? That's what you should be thinking.
Yeah, you don't want to, it's not worth putting your effort into something that you don't physically get money from.
Absolutely. The one thing I will say, the opportunity for 2020 is the fact that you get to specialize in hyper-focused content, right? 2020 is all about how do I create content that speaks to the one person? Because let's be real, if you're speaking to one type of person, then you're probably speaking to a bigger subset of that group. Because if it identifies with me and my persona, right? At the end of the day, it might speak to a lot more people. So focus really on that one person you're trying to reach. Create the audio, video, text-based pieces of content that actually moves that person from a cold lead to a warmer, and then eventually a client. So really specialize on what is that piece of content or series of content pieces that you can put out that I actually care about, and I'm not going to scroll through, right? So as we're ending, let's see, there's so many fun questions we can answer, huh? Do you have any questions? I bet you have a question in there, right?
I feel like I have lots of questions. Yeah. I think the one that I hear most is, and for me, again, like I'm much more of a data person and operations person. I think a lot of it is going back to their like, what data, what metrics do I focus on? And at the end of the day, there's like one big thing you focus on, right? Like sales, dollars. You focus on how can I edge this sale up? What seems to be resonating with the people that want to buy this product or service? If you are an accounting firm, Instagram's probably not your move. And you know that because maybe you put out an Instagram ad and no bites. Like maybe you had a ton of views because you paid for a ton of views and you paid for it to be seen by lots of people, but none of them cared. None of them actually went and bought your service or product. And that's something I think people really need to focus on. Like, again, like experiment. Just make sure you know the outcomes of those experiments and you know how to measure that.
Absolutely. The one thing for me is keep the audience that you're trying to reach in mind. For 2020, I really want you to think about, what does that person I'm trying to care about, right? And that's really it. A 25-year-old male in St. Louis might care about something different than a 75-year-old in Boston, right? Those are two very, very distinct people. So when you're creating content, make sure that reference those type of people. Again, it's okay if your posts don't speak to 9% of people. That's okay, because you really just care about that very small subset. Because if you're trying to reach everyone, listen, there's reasons that Coca-Cola, Nike have these massive amounts of budgets. They can afford billboards and radio and TV ads. Most of the time, our businesses can't, and that's okay. But we have to focus on what we can control, which is the content that we put out, and then the money behind that content. So we're wrapping up today. Thank you so much for tuning into the very first Nico Larissa Boundless Live special. Have a great day. I think we got a pretty good amount of